All right, so going through the quiz week of March 25, 2019. So it's been almost a year behind. All right, let's do it. Hijack opens 2.5, cutoff calls, button folds, and adds in the small blind. Which of these hands will always call? Any ideas?
Sorry, who opened? Sorry.
Hijack opens 2.5.
Yep. Yep.
So you've got these
Always
hands here.
calls.
Yep. So the key here is always call. So if it sometimes raises, it doesn't count. And so this is going to be different because in a lot of previous preflop ranges, there's no calling out of the small blind. So here, this this question here highlights the big differences between my preflop sims, the sims that I've run, and other sims commercially available. Other sims don't even have calls in the small blind. Here we do.
So the always is really. So when you say always call, you mean not call or fold, not call or raise, just always call?
Yes, just always call.
I want to say none of them.
All right. Well,
I want to say
there's 4 points, so it's probably going to be 4. Right?
I want to say those pocket pairs like the eights, the
Eights, fours, sixes, deuces.
sixes, the fours.
So your 6s, 4s. You want deuces?
The twos, yeah. And does the eight sometimes raise?
What do you think?
I'm
Maybe
thinking that eights sometimes raise.
Yep. So these two will sometimes raise.
Yeah.
So it's not 8s or 10s because you'll sometimes raise these. So you've got to think about the rest of these hands.
Okay, so it's not going to be Jack 10.
Why is that?
I'm pretty sure. So, like, oh wait, always call.
I think it is ace 10.
No, I said Jack 10.
Oh, okay.
Like it. Maybe ace 10 and ace jack always raise because they block a lot of the continue range.
So definitely ace jack blocks a lot of the continuing range. Like if you squeeze here, do you think hands like king 10 suited, queen 10 suited are going to continue? Not really, right? So
No.
because of that, having the 10 isn't as important in terms of blocking continuing ranges.
Yeah, but the aces.
Yeah, the aces, but you're going to have some ace in your calling range, aren't you?
You're gonna have some ace. You're going.
So here's ace 10 is the always call. I mean, you're right about Jack 10 suited. Jack 10 suited blocks pocket jacks, blocks pocket 10s. It's in some sense it doesn't really interact very well with. It's not dominated by much of the calling range, so it's difficult to dominate this particular hand.
Mm-hmm.
Right, in terms of the squeezing, it doesn't quite block the stronger hands in terms of like ace king, ace queen type stuff, but it does block jacks and 10s while simultaneously not being dominated by ace king and ace queen.
Mm-hmm.
So here it is there. 2s, 4s, and 6s always call. 10s and 8s will sometimes go for a raise. Ace 10 suited will always call. And Jack 10 suited will sometimes raise. Alright, you see how tight it is. In a small blind, set mining is pretty good. Because you're in this position, after you set mine, the big blind isn't going to squeeze too often. Right, because I've got both hijack and cutoff to deal with, and they'll be out of position. So we can get in a cheap set mine with these particular hands. Right?
Mm-hmm.
if we call and the big blind calls, it's not a huge deal because a lot of our hands will have all of these hands are basically set mining, so their equity will in general be preserved regardless of what the big blind's calling range is going to be. Really, the only issue is with set mining is if there's multiple calls, then suddenly in the big blind, right, with two callers, we're looking to overcall in the big blind. Then we're starting to worry about our opponent's pocket pairs blocking our pocket pairs or something like that, 7-6-6-5, that kind of stuff. Then set mining with particularly 5, 6s, 7s kinds of hands isn't so good because our opponent will have a good chunk of 5, 6, 7 type hands, ranked hands in their range, which blocks our chance of flopping a set, right? So in these kinds of spots, you can fold these low to middle pocket pairs because they either block the 7-6 or are blocked by the 7-6 in terms of your opponent not having a weak hand in their range, and if they do, the chance of us flopping a set is pretty low. So we end up blocking.
Sorry.
So say we've got pocket sixes, we end up blocking 7-6-6-5 in the opponent's ranges, which are relatively weak.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So we end up blocking the bottom of our opponent's ranges, which is not so great. And if our opponent does have those hands, our sets are blocked. So the combination of blocking the bottom of our opponent's range and being blocked if our opponent does have the bottom of their range means that this particular hand is just not a good hand to continue with. That's in the call line, and you'll see that a lot in both the hijack and the lowjack sim. If there's the two callers, the three callers, right, the cutoff button and small blind call, then the big blind will start to fold hands like 6s and 5s. On the other hand, pocket 2s, pocket 3s kind of hands, they don't block these suited connectors, and so your opponent will have the bottom of their range more often. And they're not blocked by very much in any of the other guys' ranges, so the chances of us flopping a set is much higher. That makes sense? But if there's only two callers, then all the pocket pairs will call.
I get it. Sorry. Yeah, just move on. I'll just review that later because I missed the positions. It's okay. Go on.
Yeah. So that's just the kind of nuance between having one caller, two callers, or three callers. In this particular spot, there's only one caller. Even with two callers, the big blind will be able to continue with a lot of their pocket pairs. The small blind with one caller will continue with a lot of their pocket pairs. On the other hand, if there's no callers, the small blind will be indifferent between calling and folding all these pocket pairs. Reason being is because if we do call, the chance the big blind will squeeze is a bit higher. Also, our pot odds aren't as good, right? So this kind of goes against the idea about the equity worsening better than the pot odds improve. But the pocket pairs in particular, because they're mostly just set mines, having better pot odds usually increases their ability to call pre-flop. And we see that with sort of cutoff calls and button calls, with the small blind always continuing with all their pocket pairs. Versus if there's no callers, then the small blind kind of rarely continues, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there was a couple of calls. Okay. All right, next one. Same kind of spot, same kind of question. Hijack opens at two big blinds this time, and our cutoff raises, and so we're in the small blind, which of the hands we're going to continue with all the time. So this is not hands which are call or folds. This is always continue.
Queens. Ace king. Want to say ace queen suited? Jacks.
So you want to say ace queen suited? Why do you want jacks?
Yeah. Trying to remember. like just because Jacks is pretty strong. But I am realizing that like your problem is that you don't want to get crushed by like the bigger overpairs. So like I'm wondering if it's King Queen suited because you block the kings and queens, but um, yeah.
Yeah, I like king queen suited too.
Yeah, so it's king queen suited. We look at it here. We've got jacks being indifferent, all the other hands being indifferent. In particular, with jacks, like if you raise, your opponent's actually going to fold a good chunk of their pocket pairs and continue with hands like ace queen, ace king. Instead, when you've got jacks, you want your opponent to have a weaker pocket pair, right? But if your opponent's going to fold their weaker pocket pairs, then we can't really get that much value with jacks. Instead, in our range, we've got queens plus an ace king. Queens clearly value because our opponent's continuing ranges will basically the bottom of it will be queens in terms of the hands which aren't indifferent. And ace queen suited, right? King queen suited does pretty well blocking basically this square on the top left of the queens plus ace queen plus and king queen, which is going to be the bulk of the continuing range for all of the players, right? Not just the cutoff, but also under the gun, which will continue around 10% of the time, and the big blind, which is a tiny factor at 2% of the time, but under the gun being quite important in the hand as well. If it was a little bit more heads up, right? If we sort of like compare the two, like here for example, then sure we've got jacks, right? So here this is how the hijack plays against cutoff out of position, right? That's kind of what it looks like, right? You got more jacks in the range, and the reason being is because you get slightly more continuing with the pocket pairs, jacks and tens, and the weaker hands which pocket jacks tend to dominate. So it's got to do with how many hands can be dominated by that particular hand or blocked.
Quick question. Like just because you'll fold out the smaller pocket pairs, don't you still just like isn't that still fine? Like you still win what 2, 8 plus 1.5, 9.5 big blinds. Like that's not that bad.
Well, when you've got jacks, you want your opponent to call with the pocket pairs.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're folding them, then jacks isn't super effective. Like if you look at the under the gun and the cutoff ranges, if you've got pocket jacks, you end up blocking a good chunk of the folding ranges for everyone. Versus king queen suited, right? Like
Okay,
I'm not arguing that jacks would fold, but I'm arguing that jacks is indifferent. Jacks, like you look at it, blocks all these hands which continue, which fold. Sorry, blocks a lot of folds, blocks a lot of folds. Versus king queen, blocks a lot of continues.
Okay. Yeah. No, makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the things multi-way. When you multi-way, blockers become pretty important. That's why those king queen squeezes become more prevalent. All right, so cutoff opens 2.5. Here we call, and the big blind, small blind calls, and then the big blind squeezes, and now cutoff folds. And so, which of the hands should always continue against the squeeze? So we've called, now the big blind, and then small blind calls, and now the big blind squeezes. Then it's back on us. All right, so tough spot.
All right. So it's safe to assume that the big blind is squeezing a pretty polar range. Okay. Off the bat, I think we can eliminate ace queen off.
Why is that?
Typically, the offsuit varieties don't fare as well.
Okay, yeah, I mean, that would be an argument for ace jack offsuit.
We're
Well,
in position.
what do you think? What do you think the big blind squeeze range is going to look like?
very polar
Why is that?
because it's so big, and he could. So the big blind could have called, right?
Sure.
So because he has such a good price on calling, like he's gonna be very polar when he
I mean,
decides to
when he calls,
squeeze.
is going to be out of position against two players, so it's not. So even though the price on calling is good, that doesn't mean that his ability to win the pot post flop is going to be good. Is going to be good as well. So because his price is good, that means that the big ones are going to be calling with a lot of hands that can speculate.
Hmm.
You know, definitely the pocket pairs, some of the suited connectors, suited aces, that kind of stuff. But in terms of like big offsuit things, they don't really want to call. Suited broadways, they don't really want to call because they play better heads up.
Hmm.
And also those kinds of hands will block continuing ranges, so squeezing with those kinds of hands makes a lot of sense. So I'll show you,
So
the big one
tens.
squeezing range. This is what the big one squeezing range looks like in this spot. So we've got the cutoff open to 2.5, button call and small blind call. Right, if you're following the button called, the nines wouldn't be in it as much. But here with the small blind calling as well, the squeeze ranges, squeeze range like this. So it's somewhat polar, but not super polar. Reason being is because it doesn't have to be super polar because the big blind doesn't need a hand like King Queen suited or Ace Jack suited or King Jack suited in their calling range. Reason being is because when you go multi-way, the ability for those hands to flop top pair, good kicker and hold is diminished.
Not good.
Right.
Yeah.
Compared if you go heads up, right? If we look at how the big blind just continues against the cutoff open heads up, a lot of that King Queen, Ace Jack, King Queen offsuit, they all make it into the calling range instead. Because going heads up, you flop top pair second kicker, top pair third kicker, something like that. That hand is going to be good a lot of the time. In fact, if your opponent checks back, you're going to be able to value bet that hand. But multi-way, that's not the case. Multi-way, these hands will not fare so well when making top pair good kicker. Right? And so these hands will much rather play heads up.
Hmm.
All right. So knowing that,
So
what do you guys think will always continue?
well, I think Ace Queen now, just because it's good blockers.
Well, once he squeezes, he has a hand that's squeezing, right? But it's more that it does well against a hand like. So we saw that he's squeezing something like King Queen, right? So it does well. Or he's squeezing like Ace Jack, right? So it dominates some.
So Ace Jack actually is probably pretty good to continue
Yeah,
with.
so both these hands are
Yeah.
good because they both block some of the pocket pairs. I mean, they block pocket pairs a little bit heavier. They block Broadway. But they do dominate a lot of the certain broadways that are squeezing, and with the second pot ratio going post flop, the fact that it's not suited isn't quite a huge deal.
So King Jack as well is fills those criteria, right?
Yeah, good.
I'd say that Ace 5 suited doesn't fill that criteria.
Yeah, all right. So Ace is not in there.
I think it's close with Ace 10 and tens.
It feels so weird to fold tens, but
Yeah, I don't think we can fold 10. You know what? Ace 10 is more dominated, which would tend me to go with the pocket pair. Like a decent sized pocket pair. Like tens probably is pretty good. Ace 10's kind of dominated by a lot of his crap.
Yeah, good.
Mhm.
All right. This is what it looks like here. If you did play Ace King, you're jamming that. I mean, look at how wide the jamming range is for the cutoff, right? Ripping tens through kings and Ace King, dropping aces, that kind of stuff. This is the button's calling range if the cutoff folds. So we got tens, Ace Queen, Ace Jack, King Queen suited, King Jack suited, and that's because this squeezing range is quite wide. Right, you need to defend. The reason why the squeezing range is quite wide is because the players who call are kind of capped, right? Right, the button calls, they're quite capped. Small blind calls. Is it small blind call?
Yes, small blind calls
as well. So like small blind super cap, look at that. Right, small blind's range is going to be like pocket pairs, and then very rarely some sort of ball base in there. So the small one's basically just got pocket pairs. The button does have some of the stronger stuff, which is what we're looking at. Not so heavy with the pocket pairs, but the small line definitely has a lot of pocket pairs. And so squeezing quite wide, especially because of them dominating the bigger pocket pairs. You want to squeeze those pocket pairs, right? Get the value against your opponent's pocket pairs, or your pocket pairs here in the button. We've got two different squeeze sizes here and here. Right, you've got a lot of pocket pairs. We've got a lot of pocket pairs in the button. So this is against a smaller squeeze size. It's against a bigger squeeze size. It's the bigger squeeze size that was chosen in this question. And it's against a smaller squeeze size. Yeah. Good stuff. All right. Next one here. Low jack opens. Button raises. And now we're on the big blind. So we're looking at a cold 4-bet spot. So this hand's going to go for the cold 4-bet.
Let's see the other hand. Okay, kings. Ace king suited.
Queens.
Okay, queens and ace king.
Yeah.
Like just strength.
Yep.
Yeah,
I like it.
It's pretty easy. This is actually what it looks like. Yeah, cold 4-bet range is very tight. Queens plus ace king, and then some other stuff that gets in there sometimes. Definitely jacks is not so good. Ace queen suited even is not so good. King suited, definitely ace queen offsuit. Like if you continue with ace queen offsuit, yeah, like raising it loses almost a big blind. So it's not great.
Yeah.
But definitely you can sometimes get it in with sometimes make this call 4-bet with like a little bit of jacks, a little bit of king queen. Yeah, jacks is he loses a little bit. Yeah, I mean jacks isn't so great. The reason why jacks isn't so great is because
You just get crushed.
You end up blocking some stuff, right? You block all those folds from the button. Yeah, blocking the folds with the ace jack, king jack, queen jack, ace jack offsuit, jack 10 suited, so block folds. Right. And also, like in particular,
Ace queen suited.
Pocket tens has slightly more equity against ace king than jacks does. So there's something to remember, like when you're deciding between jacks and tens, as like a bluff in this kind of spot. Tens often does a bit better than jacks because against ace king, tens is more equity.
Can ace queen suited?
Yeah, I mean ace queen suited has the same kind of problems.
Mm-hmm.
Right, it runs into ace king. Right, look at the continuing range. Like because button is ace king heavy to start off with, they don't really have to call with too many other ace x in order to stop you from range betting everything on an ace high board, even though you probably will be. All right. So we hero. So here is low jack. We have the cutoff call and then the button squeeze. Make this pot size squeeze or a little bit more than pot size squeeze. Yeah. So against this big squeeze, what are we continuing with?
Okay, ace king suited. I think you're folding ace jack off for sure. Just too weak.
Yep.
So queens plus ace king and ace queen suited.
Yeah, queens, ace king, ace queen suited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm in agreement.
Yeah, great. So this is it here. The ace queen suited, the queens plus. I mean, jacks gets in there a lot of the time, but basically,
Yeah, I was gonna say
against
jacks probably.
this big squeeze from imposition, you can basically play 4-bet or fold, which is what's going on here. It's basically 4-bet or fold. I mean, there's a small calling range with ace queen and queens, but like if you wanted to simplify, you can play 4-bet or fold. Like in comparison against like a smaller squeeze size, you have a slightly more calling range. Then you start to call with like a little more ace queen suited, a little more jacks, a little more queens, and like other pocket pairs at low frequency. But it's really the cutoff because they called first that will defend by calling. In these spots where you get a call and then a squeeze from imposition, you're out of position. So because you're out of position, your EV of calling is going to be much lower compared to imposition. And so because of that, you're going to basically be playing 4-bet or fold. So that's in comparison when we're out of position against a squeeze versus when we're in position against a squeeze. I think all of these are squeezes. Yeah, most of these are looking at squeeze spots. So yeah, good revision. All right, so next one. So we're in a hijack, the 2 calls and the small blind squeezes, and now we're in position. We're looking to call, so we can sort of compare that low jack spot when we're out of position to this hijack spot when we're in position. So what do you guys think?
Small blind squeezes. Okay.
Yeah, so there's 2 calls in between.
I think again you're gonna be wanting playing 4-bet or fold.
Yeah, so not necessarily because we're in position. You don't have to play 4-bet or fold.
Ah, okay. If that's the case, I think you can start to. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. What's the hand below his queen? Sorry. Tens. Okay.
So ace
I
king.
can't see us folding ace king folding. I can't see us folding ace king.
Yeah, ace king for sure.
And queens for sure. You can't fold them.
Ace queen suited.
And
can we can move down jacks now, right? Against the small blind? As we're in position.
well, you're still gonna remember he has like. I'm assuming it's pretty similar to. Remember how the big blind it would squeeze like with all the like a lot of the Broadway stuff. So I feel like jacks and tens might get dominated there, but king queen suited blocks it, so there's a possibility there.
What small blind? See, a small blind is raising with 9s and 10s, though, right?
Some of the time.
Some of the time. The king queen has better. Nah, see, king queens probably can be more dominated here. I can't see folding jacks.
I'll be honest, I can't either.
I can sort of see folding like ace queen off.
Oh yeah, definitely folding ace queen off.
All right.
Ace jack suited.
Yeah, it's just jacks.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, I mean, when you're in position, you can call a bit more pocket pairs than when you're out of position, right? If you decide to call. So just something to remember. Also, all these squeeze spots, the raise size that you can make is always like min raise or all in. So the combination of min raise and all in means that, like, if you think about jacks, whether you think you're going to be able to call that, right? If you can't call it, you might be able to just shove it, right? And you got to think about what the small blinds range is here and like how much is in the pot. So there's 2, 4, 6, 7 plus 15. So there's something like 22.5 big blinds in the pot already. So shoving it, you're risking 98 to win 22-7, right? Which is pretty good, right? On a bluff, especially a semi bluff like jacks with a lot of equity. Like jacks, of course, always gets called by the bigger pocket pairs, but it can fold out stuff like ace queen, which is 50% equity, and also get called by tens. So looking at it here, this is what it looks like. Shoving with jacks, queens, and ace king. Against the all-in, this is the continuing range. You see tens through aces and ace king. So Jack's going to have close to 50% equity against that. So it can definitely profitably shove, and it can probably shove, then it can at least profitably call, which is what we're thinking. The squeeze range looks like this here for the small blind, right? It's basically, those weaker pocket pairs. And it's a spot that is similar to what we looked at previously. So like 8s, 9s, 10s at some frequency, but definitely jacks plus and the suited broadways with a jack and a 10, and then offsuit ace queen and king queen good chunk of the time. So knowing that kind of range, if you shove into it, they're going to have to call pretty wide because of those pot odds, right? So because of those pot odds, with the wider calling range, you get a wider shoving range. Okay, and these calls are not insignificant, right? These calls puts an extra, say for example, you open by two big blinds, right? These calls essentially give the equity on a call against a shove, right? So in the spots like this, an extra 2%. And so against a 2.5 big blind open, 2.5% extra pot odds on a call. Right, 2.5%.
EV.
Yeah, 2.5% EV on a call, right? So against these squeezes, the way to continue a good chunk of the time is to have a shoving range, and you should have a shoving range, especially if you're the opener and you're defending against a squeeze. Because of that extra dead money, right? If you compare it to like say cutoff and button didn't call, right? There'd only be 18.5 big blinds in the middle compared to the 22.5 big blinds, right? With the two callers. So that 4 big blinds difference means that essentially to call a shove, you need 4% less equity to call, right? And that 4% is substantial in terms of widening the calling range.
Yeah, it is.
Right. Similarly, that extra 4% means that we get 4% extra back when we win an extra 4% on the odds for a block. All right. So remember that. Yeah. Hijack opens. Cutoff calls, button calls, small blind calls, and it's on us. So hijack opens and then everyone calls, and now it's on us.
So the call or raise would probably be 8s. Just they're the biggest pair there. So is this like you were saying before, where we're better off continuing with the smaller, like the 4s and the 6s? So they're the ones that have the bad blockers to the
7-6 suited,
connectors?
6-5 suited.
Yeah.
So
Uh,
I'll be honest, I'm just most worried about so like I think set over set scenarios are something that's going to be impacting this. So because the cutoff calls and the button calls and the small blind called, like all these guys have quite a few pocket pairs in them, right? So if we already saw the small blind has a lot of stuff like deuces through sevens, right? So if that's the case, then like a hand like deuces might get destroyed, right? If it gets sit over set, like that's just so unfortunate. So I think deuces folds.
um, I was just thinking about that other question where we kind of folded like sixes, but continued with twos.
Which one?
And there was a question, I think it was like the first or second. Maybe it was the first. You know where we were looking at the suited connectors, and that there was that little gap in the pocket pairs where we were continuing with like twos and threes. Then fours was getting iffy, and sixes we were actually not continuing with. We just talked about it.
Yeah. Okay. But didn't we call all of them?
No, there was a gap in that line with the pocket pairs where I think it was like fives and sixes were not continued. Based on that other question, I'm tending to think the sixes are the fold, the fours are the call or fold, and actually the twos are the call. But that's only because we just talked about that.
Yes, this is it. I mean, this. I think I made this question before the sim ran to completion. This is it here. I mean, before the sim ran to completion, Fortis was indifferent between calling and folding, but then the EV bumped up a bit. But the twos is higher EV than all the other pocket pairs, all the other big pocket pairs, right? So here twos is half a big blind you win. So when calling, you end up winning 1.5 big blinds back from the pot. But like nines not so good. I mean eights is still minus EV in terms of you're not winning your entire big blind back from the big blind. So like twos is in terms of EV almost as strong as nines, right? So you got to be able to rank your hands. There's threes there, better than fours, better than fives. Sixes is really bad. Sevens is okay, but still pretty bad. So yeah, sixes and sevens aren't really good at calling. So the ones in the middle, right, because they end up blocking the bottom of the continuing ranges and being blocked by parts of the opponent's ranges, means that when we continue, our opponent is not going to have the bottom of their range as often, and if they do have the bottom of their range, the chance of us flopping a set is going to be reduced. So that in total, going multi-way is not so good, right? The effect of it being on fours is reduced once the sim ran to completion. So I might change this question up a bit later. Might replace fours with like sevens and eights with nines or something. But the answer will be the same kind of idea.
Now, the reason is part of the reason the twos have higher EV is because when they hit, they unblock all villains, like top pairs, and so we're gonna have a lot of checking EV. We're gonna get bet into a lot, so the EV is gonna be higher.
Well, I mean, twos is a pretty high EV because none of these players are going to have a two in their range. Like a hijack only opens ace two suited. Cutoff isn't calling with a two. Button's not calling with a two. Small one's not calling with a two. Besides pocket twos. So like because of all that, all right, the chance of you hitting a set is literally higher. You've literally got a higher chance of flopping a set because your opponent doesn't have a two in their hand, right? It can't really be said for sixes, right?
So they could have 6-5, 7-6.
Yeah, one of these guys has a much higher chance of having six in their hand, right?
Yeah, it
Like
makes sense.
if one of them has a six in their hand, the chance of you flopping a set is literally halved. which is a lot. You go down from like 18% equity or 16% equity down to half of that, maybe like 7% equity, which is not so good.
Also, I guess the mid pocket pairs like the sixes and sevens on certain runouts, there's the board can be connected. So even if you hit your six, you can still get. Well, I guess that's applicable for twos as well. Like if the board's
No,
connected.
you actually that's probably a good point. No, because like if the board's connected, it was like deuce 3-4, right? Or deuce 3-5. I don't know, whatever you want, right? Like
Yeah.
the deuces will still be fine, right? But you're right, like sixes on like
Seven or like
yeah, like
5, 7, 8 or something.
6-10-9, right? Like then
Yeah.
there's 8-7, right? So
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting point to make as well.
yeah, like okay.
All right, this one. So hijack, we're here. Hijack opens to 2, cut off 3 bets, and the button cold calls. The button is cold calling a 3 bet, and we're looking to continue. So against the button, cold call the 3 bet.
So if I'm not mistaken, you can basically treat the button cold calling as like his range is not like he's got a super like this is a good player, right? So his range is gonna be very tight. It's gonna be almost like a cold 4 bet range. Right? Am I right?
Yeah, in some sense, yeah.
Okay, so we can't get too crazy. So I think you're probably folding ace jack suited then, because I think you're dominated too much.
All right, what about 10-9? You're pretty easily dominated with 10-9 as well.
I thought 10-9 was probably the fold.
So, like 10-9 suited is dominated by like jack 10 suited.
Well, in terms of the range of hands that cold calls the 4 bet, you're dominated by stuff like 10s, 9s, 10s, 9s, jacks, right? Dominate that.
Mm-hmm.
Ace jack is dominated by ace queen and ace king, but still is okay against 10s and 9s. Like
I just don't like the 10
9s gets gutted by
the low end of the straight.
9s plus. I mean, yeah, it does become the low end of the straight, but like the main thing is that it just gets wrecked by a bigger pocket pair.
Can't you just also say that 7-6 also gets wrecked by a big pocket pair?
No, because 10-9 will almost never make a straight against a big pocket pair. Well, it'll make a straight about half the time against a big pocket pair, because a big pocket pair blocks half of the top end. Right?
Okay, yeah, okay. Yep. All right. So fold 10-9 suited. I think 7-6 you're probably going to be want to call because
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
like they're hitting that doesn't interact with them at all.
Call or fold ace jack and call or raise
yeah,
ace.
agree. Yeah.
Yes, this is it here. I mean 7-6 you can sometimes go for the 4 bet, but the EV is a little bit higher to call, according to the sim. Right, ace jack is indifferent there. Like 10-9, yeah, not so good. Calling loses you about 1/20th of the big blind, 1/25th of the big blind. It's not a huge amount, but like, yeah, you end up getting wrecked pretty easily. There isn't
Is 9-8 suited
there
going to
isn't
be
much of a cold call range like against the 3 bet. Maybe against a smaller 3 bet, there's more of a cold call range. Against a bigger 3 bet, yeah, against a bigger 3 bet, there's more of a cold call range. But the cold call range is kind of like here you got a little bit of ace queen, a little bit of queens, a little bit of jacks, a little bit of 10s, a little bit of 9s, a little bit of king, ace king suited. It's just not much of a cold call range. But even against weaker opponents with wider cold call ranges, like if cold calling a 3-bet, like what does that really look like? It looks like a hand like Jacks, Ace, Queen, that kind of stuff, right? So if you're up against a hand like Jacks or Ace, Queen, like 10-9 doesn't do so good, but 7-6 does a bit better, especially because you're getting really good odds. You're getting 25% pot odds to call after the cold call. So you can definitely call all the pocket pairs, right? Because the chance of them flipping a set is going to be 12%, and if you flop a set, you're probably going to win twice the pot. So yeah, that makes up for your 25% right there.
Wait, which hand? Sorry.
A pocket pair. So
Yeah.
like, if you've got a pocket pair, right, you've got 25% odds to call now. If you've got a pocket pair, and the chance of you flopping a set is going to be roughly 12% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And if once you flop a set, you're going to win at least twice the pot.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, on average. So it's pretty easy to make up that 25% pot odds with a pocket pair. Also, that's flopping a set. So flopping a set, you win twice the pot. Or if you don't flop a set, you turn a river a set if it checks through. So there is some of that as well. So even if you don't flop a set, like there's a chance that it checks down, and then you turn a river a set. So you still have some equity left, even if you don't flop a set. And so you get EV from that. The same kinds of things can be said about 7, 6, 6, 5, 5, 4, right? Straights and flush draws will do pretty well. I mean, if you flop a strong straight draw or a flush draw, you'll win roughly the pot. On average, that's heads up, but multi-way you probably win a little bit less. Also, like 2-pair type hands, you're going to be flopping 5-6% of the time. So all of that together means that you should be able to make up your 25% odds to call there. Unlike Ace Jack and 10-9, which are pretty easily dominated. Like 10-9 against Jacks or Queens, like it's going to be pretty tough to make a straight with the top end, because the top end of 10-9 gets dominated by Ace 10. But also, like if that's for the Jack, King, Queen, but like in terms of other stuff like King, Queen, like Queen, Jack 8. What is Queen, Jack 8? Sorry, not Queen, Jack 8. It would be like,
well, Queen, Jack 8. You just like if they have queens and jacks, they just block it, right?
yeah, they block it pretty hard. So it's pretty difficult to do that. Same with the Jack same with the Jack 8-7. Like Jacks blocks that pretty hard. So like you get blocked a lot at the top end, and so you're really only trying to flop a straight with the bottom end, which doesn't end up so good for you. Anyway. Right, because like if the bottom end of the straight comes, you're going to be trying to pry money out of your opponent's hands versus the top end. Like if the bottom end of the straight flops, both players are going to be fairly defensive rather than aggressive and piling the money in. Okay, so next one. Hazard opens to 2. We get a 3-bet and now a cold 4-bet. Should probably be a full stop instead of a comma. Now it's on us in the hijack. So we open the hijack, get 3-bet by the cutoff, and then cold 4-bet by the small blind. What are we continuing with?
Kings, ace, king suited.
Isn't this hands where should be folding?
Sorry.
These are hands which hands should be folding, not.
Oh, sorry, my bad. Yeah, my bad. Okay.
So 10s and jacks, I think, off the bat.
Yeah, I agree because they're just at best flipping. Sorry, what's the pre-flop action? Sorry. So it's we open 3-bet, cold 4-bet. Okay.
I
I
guess
think you
ace
actually
queen.
fold king queen.
Yeah, agreed. And maybe ace queen as well. This isn't one of the times when we call ace queen, I don't think, suited.
Oh no, you're definitely not calling here. You pretty much play 5 better for fold.
Yeah, so you play playing 5-bet or fold. This is the 5-bet range. Queens plus and ace king, like queens can sometimes fold, ace king offsuits can sometimes fold. So like in terms of like the min 5-bet, it's like aces and then a little bit of queens, a little bit of kings, a little bit of ace king, and then this 5-bet shutting range of kings, ace king suited, a little bit ace king offsuit. So yeah, 5-bet or fold, that's what it looks like. Very tight. Alright, so another squeeze spot. So hijack opens, 2 calls, knocks on us in the small blind. I think we might have went through something very similar here.
Yeah.
Except here the button calls instead. The button calls now.
I think fours is a pure call because it's got such great set mining, but you're not going to raise it for sure.
You could raise or call the eights.
Yeah, I agree. It's the same. Yeah, it was very similar to nines. And then I'd kind of rather have ace 10 as a raise. Yeah, I think I'd raise ace 10 suited before I raise jack 10. Like, I do remember that ace 10 suited was the always call from question 1, but...
So you want to go raise jack 10 suited all the time?
I didn't, but...
Or do you want to go raise ace 10 suited all the time?
So, I remember ace 10 suited was called almost all the time from question 1 against a few calls, right? So, that leads me to put it in... like, when the button folded, ace 10 suited was called.
Yep.
But anyways, I don't see it making much of a difference if the button calls or not. I think ace 10 suited will probably call or fold. Maybe because the button called, now you're a little bit more likely to fold it.
So this goes here, and this goes
Yeah.
here.
Jack 10.
You guys happy with that?
Yeah,
I just
but I'm
don't-
still. Yeah, I'm the same way. I think that Mark was just going to say is like I remember this question, and I didn't quite get it. I think I'm getting closer now. I think it's more like because of blockers, or because also the connectedness, the connectedness of Jack 10 and the blockers. I think is what makes it a raise. Though I did think for sure it was the ace 10.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the connectedness, it's just the difficulty dominating it. Right, so if you squeeze, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult to call with a hand that dominates jack 10. Right, if you squeeze, like, ace jack's kind of like, yeah. Ace 10's like, no.
Oh, okay. I see. Yeah, okay.
Jack's like, yeah. So, like, it's difficult to call with a hand that dominates it. Like, completely
aces.
dominates. Like, if you've got... Yeah, I mean, aces is probably not going to call. Depends on the size that you squeeze as well. But in terms of the bigger pocket pairs, those bigger pocket pairs are probably going to raise. And so you're really only worried about ace king and ace queen. That might call. So against the calling range, right, you've got good equity if you flop a jack or a 10. You also block jacks and 10s, which will continue at a very high frequency for most of the other players. So blocking those 2 pocket pairs and having good equity when called means that jack 10 is going to be a high frequency call. So I've got it here. Fours always calls. A's can sometimes squeeze. Jack 10 suited. Is this the right one? Yeah. Yeah, jack 10 suited. Very much always squeezes. Right, there's a sliver of calling there, but I think it's just because the sim is like, if you look at the EVs, like the EV of raising wins like a quarter of a big blind more, not a quarter, 2/10 of the big blind more, 2/100, 2% of a big blind more, and their ace 10 is call or fold. All right, the last one. Any questions about that with the jack 10? You guys kind of understand?
No, I think I get it, because like if you do it with ace 10 suited,
if you compare jack 10 to queen 10, like queen 10, right? They look like very similar hands, but queen 10 runs into ace queen, right? It's dominated by ace queen. Queen jack does a bit better because it blocks both queens and jacks, and queens and jacks always continues for everyone. So like queen 10 folds because it gets dominated by the ace queen, which continues. Right, blocking queens isn't super important because you get ace queen dominating you. So when you flop a queen, you're not very happy. But if you flop if it becomes like a jack high 10 high flop when you've got jack 10, you're pretty happy, because your opponent with very ace king or ace queen high heavy ranges won't have hit that flop.
No, it makes sense.
We can have a quick look at the continuing range against the two squeeze sizes. So here it's against the small squeeze size, right? Jacks and 10s continuing at a high frequency against the big squeeze size. Jacks and 10s once again continuing at a high frequency, but they're like, for both of them, it's very ace king, ace queen, queen queen heavy for all the other players. Great. So hopefully we put everything in correctly. All right. Any questions about anything that we went through?
No, it actually all made quite a bit of sense, like once explained.
All right. Anyone who doesn't have a mic can type their question now. No? All right. So hopefully you guys all enjoyed this and got something out of it. Like, there's a lot of squeeze spots I've looked through. I think all these are squeeze spots. I think that was the theme that I had in my mind when I was making this quiz. So lots of squeezes, lots of squeezing. Learning how to squeeze and how to defend against squeezes is fairly important. So, yeah. You can always go through the quiz again yourself and then watch the video again because I'll have it up soon. All right. Thanks, guys. See you.
Thank you. Be well,
Great
everyone.
session.